Saludos por toda la banda que nos está viendo.
Humans come in all shapes and sizes, and every shape and size is beautiful because every human is beautiful in their own way. Except you. You're embarrassingly and hideously ugly and a disgrace. Anyways, the type of body I'm going to focus on today is at the larger end of the spectrum, because these are the 20 largest humans to ever live. Number 20. Ulambayar Bayambayav. Now, I bit my tongue a few times trying to say that man's name in one shot, so I am not going to do it again. Anyway, our first entrant on this list is not really a big man in terms of height, but in terms of his girth. You see, being the biggest does not always mean in a singular direction. Sometimes it's just about being so big that no one can really push you around. To that end, this man I'm talking about is a sumo wrestler. These are the guys that intentionally get so big that they can push around other people and literally throw their weight around. And for this guy, he was not only tall, but he was also heavy. He was almost 2 meters tall and 158 kilograms. For a sumo wrestler, that is pretty good. And what may surprise you the most, though, is that this man is not actually from Japan, he's from Mongolia, which may be why his name was so hard to pronounce in the first place. He's a two-time winner of the Sumo World Championships, both in 2006 and 2007. He's also entered in over 100 matches, winning all the gold medals in both Japan, Mongolia, Thailand, and the United States, Italy, Germany, and more. So again, the guy really knows how to throw his weight around, which is exactly what you want to do in this sport. He's gotten so popular over the years that he's been in all kinds of movies and television shows. No, I'm not joking. Remember that movie Ocean's 13? Well, they had a sumo wrestling scene, and he was one of the wrestlers in that scene. He's also been on King of the Nerds, Big Brother, and even The Bachelorette. He was not one of the people vying for her hand, but could you imagine if he was? The point is, the guy is large and in charge, and if I never have to speak his name again, my tongue will certainly be grateful. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button, and click the notification bell right now, or this centipede will crawl on your face when you're sleeping. Now it's time for the sweet topic. Sumo wrestlers are big. It's kind of a prerequisite for the sport, but if legend can be believed, back in the 19th century there was a sumo wrestler that was unlike any other. One that was so large, he made wrestlers today look like scrawny toddlers by comparison. This is an artist's recreation of him that's been made based on records that were kept and read and studied in more recent times. Maybe someone wrote the numbers down wrong, but if he was this big, I bet that he'd never lost a fight. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below using the hashtag #SweetTopic. Number 19. Sultan Kozan. Next up, we have Sultan Kozan, and the reason that he's on this list is quite simple. In terms of the world right now, he is the tallest living man. That's a fact that's backed up by the Guinness Book of World Records, and they're not people to mess around with when it comes to their record keeping. This man is from Turkey and has had an interesting life due to his height. For example, he was so tall that he wasn't able to finish school. I'm not really sure how that works, but when you're almost 2.5 meters tall, I'm sure that a lot of people don't really want to sit behind you. He describes the advantages of being tall as being able to see a great distance, and also being able to help his family with domestic chores, such as changing light bulbs and hanging curtains. He lists the disadvantages as not being able to find clothing for his legs, which measure 126 centimeters, and for his arms with a sleeve length of 97 centimeters, or shoes that will fit his rather large feet. While he is famous for his height, it's not something that has brought him instant fame or even happiness. We like to think of these people as being rock stars in their own way, but being tall can actually cause a whole lot of problems, and that is sometimes forgotten. Number 18. Jeff Gabe. Continuing our Rolodex of different ways to be considered the largest of something, we have Jeff Gabe. I mean, wow, these names are getting so much easier to say, and this will probably backfire on me eventually. When you look at Gabe from the front and focus on things like his chest, shoulders, and head, you'll see nothing wrong with him, but the moment that he holds up his arms and hands, you're going to see something very wrong, anatomically speaking. Because unlike most other people in the world, Jeff's hands and arms are disproportionate to the rest of his body. In other words, they are huge. I mean, seriously, look at those arms and hands and tell me that it's normal. He'll happily admit that it's not, as well as anyone else who sees them. Just the circumference of his arm alone is almost a half a meter. I mean, can you even imagine? Well, you don't have to, because he's right here in front of you. Due to the size of his hands and arms, a lot of people think that he has a medical condition which led him to being this way. But the twist here is that no one can find out what that condition is. There is medically nothing wrong with him, and yet his arms and hands are much bigger than they should be. The irony of it all is that one of his favorite hobbies is actually arm wrestling, but I doubt that he loses all that often. Number 17. Macy Curran. So far, I've shown you a trio of men who have fit the biggest or largest category in some certain way, but with Macy Curran, I'm dipping into the ladies' side of the gene pool, because there have been plenty of women who have been giants in their own ways, and this one is absolutely no different. Remember when people would predict how big you would be when you were young? Even back then, people thought that Macy would be tall, probably around 2 meters tall, which is not really a typical height for a woman, but everyone was actually shocked when she was that tall and in the 7th grade. While she didn't go too far above that, her body is definitely something to be surprised at, especially when you look at the length of her legs. Her legs alone make up about 60% of her height, and she's now held the world record for the longest legs by a teenager and a woman. Just how long are her legs? Well, if you put the average female in the United States next to her, her legs would only be a little shorter than that other woman whole. That is absolutely stunning. That all being said, like others on this list, there are costs to being this way. She was bullied often for her height and has had to have her clothing custom made for her so that she can actually wear it. She also hates traveling on planes because of the cramped seats, and she can't fit into a whole bunch of cars. Still though, she's trying to be an inspiring figure for those of atypical height, especially of the female kind, and that is something to be appreciated. Number 16. Rumesa Gelgi. Now I'm going to talk about back-to-back tall women, because Rumesa Gelgi is currently the tallest woman in the world today. Due to that, she's a star, an activist, a public speaker, and the holder of a staggering number of 5 Guinness World Record titles. Now, we did just meet a rather tall person in Macy Curran, but how much taller could Rumesa be? A good set of centimeters, in fact. All being told, this Turkish woman is over 215 centimeters tall, so yeah, she's got the height. But there's a catch with it all, a very sad one indeed. You see, unlike Macy, who is just simply very tall, Rumesa has Weaver syndrome, a condition that results in a person being unusually tall, having a rather large head, and typically deals with an impaired intellect. It's a very rare disease, so rare in fact, that she was actually the first person in all of Turkey to ever have been recorded having it. Even with those issues, she continues to live her life as best she can, being an advocate for her disease and trying to live her life in the best way possible. That's what real strength is right there. Number 15. Nikolai Valuev. Nikolai Valuev is a very famous person in Russia and holds a lot of records for himself due to his size. Specifically, he was 2.13 meters tall and weighed 148 kilograms. And that's a big guy. And you want to know his profession? Professional boxer. Not only was he a big boxer, but he was an absolute giant in the ring. He was so big that he eventually became the record holder for the tallest and heaviest boxing champion in history. He was a 2-time WBA heavyweight boxing champion and had 50 wins in 53 fights and won 34 of them by KO. And his only 2 losses were when he was champion. But that's still pretty good, given how boxing works. The irony of it all is that he didn't have the best hands in the business. In fact, his losses were to men who were much smaller than him, showing that size really doesn't always matter. Plus, when he did retire from boxing, he had to deal with a whole lot of joint problems. Still though, he's a landmark in professional boxing, and he's not someone that you really want to stand in the ring against, unless you like the idea of being beaten up by a giant, although I wouldn't judge you too much. Number 14. Sayad Gharibi. Now, this man was known as the Iranian Hulk, and he got a lot of infamy on Instagram when he began posting pictures of his body, and he was absolutely jacked. And while he was under 2 meters tall, he weighed 174 kilograms, which meant that he had a lot of mass to spread all throughout his body, and a lot of it went to the upper half, not that he minded it very much. As you can imagine, he was a massive weightlifter, but he was also a man who dabbled in mixed martial arts, even getting challenged by some people in the UFC at one point. Could you even imagine this massive hulk of a man throwing punches and kicks at you and not really being able to stop him? Despite all of that, his attempts to get into combat sports failed, and he was knocked out in a boxing match in the first round. What does it all prove? Well, it just goes to show that just because you're a massive mammoth of a man, it doesn't really mean that you'll be an unstoppable juggernaut. Still though, there are many people in the world who would love to have his physique, and that's simply the truth. Number 13. Elisane Silva. Shall we go down to Brazil to have a little fun? Here, we're meeting a very tall woman named Elisane Silva. She was very easily dubbed Brazil's tallest woman because she was 2.07 meters tall. But like a certain other tall woman on this list, her height was not really meant to be that way. When she was just 10 years old, she was already 1.75 meters tall. That's a really tall child. And so some doctors decided to have a look at her because it's not really a good metric for how young kids are supposed to grow. It turned out that there was a reason she was so tall, and that's because she had a tumor. That tumor not only caused her to grow really tall, but also to have severe pain in her body. In fact, she suffered pain almost all over. Thankfully though, she did not grow that tall, or she'd be looming over everyone else on our list. While she did get bullied in school, she turned things into a positive and became a model, and I'm pretty sure that Brazil doesn't have a whole lot of models like her. She's also being a role model for taller women so that they can accept their own length and see what good things can come from it. Number 12. Oliver Richters. Oliver Richters is a Dutch-born giant, actor, professional bodybuilder, fitness model, and entrepreneur. His nickname is the Dutch Giant, and it barely does justice to his 2.18 meter stature. He also weighs 153 kilograms. So, he's tall, he has the bulk, and that makes him a mean combination that many people approve of. What do I mean by that? Well, he's never been afraid to push himself or his body, and has learned multiple skills in order to help make him more appealing. To the camera, that is. That's what's led him to being in commercials, television shows, movies, and more. You have to appreciate a man with that kind of drive, and for some productions, they're absolutely looking for a guy like him. But here's a fun fact. Have you ever watched the Marvel Cinematic Universe film Black Widow? Perhaps you remember a certain prison scene with Red Patriot, where he broke that man's arm during the arm wrestling contest. Well, that was Oliver Richters. He was meant to be a reference to the Walking Bear character of Ursa. I'm not really sure that we'll see him in the MCU again, so be grateful that you got this one in the first place. Number 11. Juan Pedro Franco. Now, I'm going to talk about Juan Pedro Franco, a man who is an inspirational story for a different reason than the others I've talked about so far. Juan Pedro Franco was crowned the heaviest person alive by the Guinness World Records in 2016 after weighing in at a whopping 92 stone with a little extra weight tacked onto that. For context, if you put 10 average-sized men together, he would weigh more than them. That's not exactly healthy in any way, shape, or form. His weight had actually crippled him, and he was stuck in bed. He needed a lot of help to sit up or even try to move at all, and it was not a very good thing. The only thing that had saved his life were some medical procedures, which allowed him to lose well over half of his body weight, and then he got slimmed down some more after that. And it's a good thing that he was able to get the help, because no one should be that much of a prisoner within their very own body.